separate legal status seems to have become operative inadmissibility in 45. I think the right of return dates from 1948. I can't say for certain. I can't give you an absolute answer on that. On the question of Hamas, as I said, they gave a qualified position. They said if the current Palestinian Authority negotiates a settlement and puts it to a national referendum and the people accept it, they will accept it. In principle, that position is no different than Israel's. What do I mean? At Camp David in 2000, when Ehud Barak, representing the Israelis, was negotiating a settlement with the Israelis, the Palestinians, and Clinton presiding, Barak acknowledged that he had what he called a very weak coalition in Israel. And one of his conditions was any settlement that was reached would have to be put before a national referendum, because he said maybe my coalition isn't representative of Israel as a whole. So the condition that Hamas is putting is exactly the same as the condition that the Israelis are putting. So to my thinking, that's a reasonable position. Both sides are taking it. The problem is the Israeli side refuses the 67 border. That's the problem. As Carter says, Israel refuses to accept international law and withdraw its legal border. That's the problem. Yes?
So my question to you is, you're probably going to Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard professor, who's also like a renowned lawyer in the United States, came to speak here at law court. So my question to you is, how am I supposed to take you serious as an academic when someone asks a question about you to Dershowitz, and he pulls a comic out of his pocket that you drew of him masturbating on the dead bodies of Palestinians? How am I supposed to take you or anybody, like Paul, with your tenure? How are we supposed to be serious as an academic when you draw pictures like that?
Well, I think here we should we apply a normal standard. And the normal standard is you shouldn't trust me. You should not. The omnibus will be funded. You should doubt everything. You should on your own go and check the facts and see whether or not what I say bears up against the facts. One of the things I've noticed is, for example, I speak quite a lot lately. I've been asked to speak and I've taken advantage of the opportunity. I speak at some length. At the end of every talk I ask to go to dissenters first. And I notice there are no dissenters. And that for some reason tells me maybe it's not my facts that are being disputed. That seems to be a reasonable inference. Now, on the specific questions, I do not want to go there. Because I don't want to get involved in the he said, she said. There is a huge amount on my own website where I ask for the evidence for those claims that Professor Dershowitz made. To my knowledge, he never supplied any evidence for those claims. I wish I had the artistic talent that he ascribed to me, but I don't. I would also say, I shouldn't be going there, but it's hard to resist. I find it perplexing that Professor Dershowitz, who made a career in the 70s by defending pornographers, he was a defender for Deep Throat. He then went on to write a monthly column in Penthouse magazine. He then, in most recent months, defended Elliot Spitzer on the ground that prostitutes do not suffer and they make a good wage. And he knows something about prostitution, for sure. I find it perplexing that, given his own record, that Mr. Dershowitz should suddenly be so indignant and shocked at a bawdy cartoon. A bawdy cartoon which A, I never drew, B, never appeared on my website. C, never had anything to do with me, but which Mr. Dershowitz then sent to a Catholic university along with a 60-page dossier in order to deny me tenure. It works at a Catholic university. Now, having said that, I'd like to give a piece of a recommendation. As I said earlier, you should not trust me. I am from the old school, doubt everything. But I can give you a suggestion. Happens to be from your side of the world. A fellow named Frank Menetres. Mr. Menetres graduated second in his class at UCLA Law School. Mr. Menetres was the editor of the UCLA Law Review. Mr. Menetres then went on to get his philosophy PhD from UCLA. Mr. Menetres was then interviewed for a job in philosophy at Harvard. He chose instead to work here in the state of California in the appeals court. Mr. Menetres, on his own, I had never met him, had no conversation with him. Mr. Menetres was actually perplexed like you. Who to believe? Who's telling the truth? Would you mind bringing over the paperback copy of the book? He had the same perplexity as you. And what did Mr. Menetres do? He sat down, and he has a first-rate legal mind, went through all of the evidence, and he wrote a long article. It comes to 30 pages, entitled, Who's Right and Who's Wrong? Dershowitz v. Finkelstein. He went through every single allegation that Dershowitz had leveled against me. Every single one. Read for yourself. He concluded there was no evidence to support any of them. It was all made up. You judge for yourself. He lays out all the evidence.
Presenting just the facts. I wanted to ask you a question in light of current events here at UCI. As you may know, this week, folks on campus are celebrating their 60th birthday, and next week we'll be having Palestinian Awareness Week. On the topic of anti-Semitism, there will be some claims of anti-Semitism next week. So my question is to you, how do Israelis justify their characterization of Arabs and others who speak out against Israel and its actions as anti-Semitic? And can you clarify who falls under the umbrella of Semitism?
I don't really care about the linguistic questions. You want to call those who harbor prejudices against Jews anti-Semites. It seems to me that's perfectly legitimate. And we shouldn't get bogged down in who's a Semite and who's not a Semite. We shouldn't get, lost in linguistic questions. It's not a question of whether or not you're an anti-Semite. The question is whether the charge is valid or not. And my answer now is, when somebody says, you're an anti-Semite, I think the answer you should all give is, like Jimmy Carter. One of the two good things Jimmy Carter did, in my opinion, two important one might say landmark victories were on the number one, Jimmy Carter delegitimized the use of the epithet of anti-Semite against critics of Israel. That's over now, because it fell flat when it was used against Jimmy Carter, and I don't think it's going to work much anymore. And number two, he delegitimized the use of the term anti-Semite. He legitimized the use of the term apartheid to describe what Israel is doing in the occupied territories. That too is now no longer verboten, forbidden territory. And that's an important accomplishment. Just as a matter of record, here when he uses the word apartheid, it creates such a hysteria. But then, just last week,